This is a nice Zoom feature I like.
Nice that it lets us know that
Yeah.
we're being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sanjana, what do you think are some things that men unconsciously do that may inadvertently make the women feel less included in a software setting?
So I can think of one example straight off the bat. That is, recently I'm uh, I'm a member of my coding club, and we were just discussing technologies. And I mentioned that I'm not fond of web development. I don't like it. So then they asked me, "What do you like?" So I thought a little bit, and I thought I like designing programs and systems. And their immediate reaction was, "But you don't know anything about it." But this is not based on my answer. Whatever I would have answered, I would have got a reply like that. I could have said machine learning, and they'd probably say, "Everyone likes machine learning. What's new about that?" If I said web development, they'd ask me to name all the languages I know and then pick on the one that I don't know. So these, I'm used to this kind of a reaction. It's very common, but it's very gatekeepy.
Yeah, I feel like that's very like very explicit gatekeeping. Like I feel like that's not even trying to hide, behind some other intention. That's just like very clear gatekeeping. That's very unfortunate that like you've had to face that. But it's awesome that you've like been persevering like regardless. Um, yeah. Sorry. I should we be like answering these in the chat or sorry, in the ed as
Yep.
well? So we should be like typing and talking at the same time.
Like for my AMA session, what I did was that this Zoom was just basically for the people who are answering questions to kind of figure out like what approach you want to focus on when answering the questions, because depending on the question that we ask, like maybe two people might have differing opinions, and like if you were to put two different comments there that are conflicting in a sense, there you might give the students or like people like a weird direction of like which one to choose on. So like
Mhm.
actually, in terms of the actual answers, yeah, feel free to add them in the ad thread. I know like it's hard to like when I was doing it, it was hard when I was moderating and I was typing and I was talking to people. Like I could not do three of them at once.
That's definitely multitasking.
Yeah.
Multi-threading, one might say. Um, cool. So um Sanjana, do you want to like write down what you kind of just said? Because I think that's a really great example.
Yeah, sure. Let me just do that.
Mm, let's see. I'm trying to find like the thread again. Oh, okay. So I'm trying to think of an example of like something that's more unconscious that I've noticed. Um, I think one other thing that I've noticed in, I guess, discussions about women in tech in general is that I've seen that people tend to, lump like women engineers as a single like lump of people, where like they're kind of generalizing all women's experiences into one, which I think also like others the women, because it makes them feel like being a woman is the primary part of their identity in the workplace, not just being an engineer. And so I think it's also a very difficult line to walk, because I think there is something very unique about being a woman in tech, but at the same time, generalizing all women's experience into one thing and thinking that all women engineers are the same, or that they all share the same experiences and have the same opinions, is very othering, and very can also make people feel less included.
Like on a similar line of thought, I could say that there's some sense of responsibility we might feel of representing women, and that
Mhm.
might add a lot of pressure on us. Like if we mess up, then there's hope for a lot of people to say that women are not good enough. So I think there's a lot of pressure to be perfect and not mess up, make mistakes. That's part of being a woman in tech.
Definitely. Yeah, maybe I'll like um also put like a quick reply about that, what I just kind of mentioned as well.
Talking while
Sure.
typing is.
It's very hard, yeah. And I think it's just because like I guess it's just two of us kind of mainly talking. It's difficult. I'd love to hear like other people's opinions on this question as well. Like the question is, what is something that you think men do unconsciously that may inadvertently make women feel less included in a software setting? I don't know if anybody else has opinions or thoughts or experiences. But if you do, please feel free to share. Feel free to share in the chat as well, I think.
Forget to include us in the conversation. That happens. Happens a lot in my coding club. We have discussions, and the girls are usually the ones sitting, at the back of the room where the lighting's low or behind the pillar. You can't really hear anyone. And then they're excluded from the discussion, so they start feeling like they don't belong there, and then they start dropping off and the numbers decrease. There's no participation. And then when you actually call it out, then people say, but the girls aren't interested, they're not participating. So that's a difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think there's something inherent about being like a minority in a room where it's, it makes it that much more difficult to speak up and be the loud one and make your opinions heard, just because if you don't feel like you have similarities with other people in the room, maybe you don't feel like you're qualified to say something, or maybe you just don't feel comfortable saying something. So I think, yeah, it definitely is pretty easy to forget to include sometimes women in conversations when they're just not represented. So I think like making a conscious effort to include women is like extremely important. And it's not like some people will be like, why do you want us to treat women and men differently? Like it's unfair. People will like sometimes allege like reverse discrimination or something like that. But I guess what I just said kind of is the reasoning why we should like make efforts to include women and other underrepresented minorities, because it is harder to speak up when you don't feel like you're similar to other people in the room.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to put in a lot of extra effort to be taken seriously, or feel like you have to prove something to people.
Exactly.
So
yeah. Sam asks, have you ever been interrupted while bringing up an issue or bringing up a topic? Has a manager stepped in to back you up? I personally, in my like work experiences, this hasn't happened, because I think I'm pretty fortunate to work in an environment where, even though there aren't nearly as many women engineers as male engineers, there are people are very aware of like treating everybody equally, and I think my coworkers are very respectful people. I can remember one time, and I think this relates to another question on this forum, which was like, when did you can you recall a situation where you tangibly felt treated differently? Once at a hackathon in college, I was presenting my project, which I like spent all night working on with my partner, who was male. And when it came to the judges to question what we did on the project technically, the male judge kept asking my partner all the questions. And when my partner said, Kelsey worked on these things too, the male judge was like, oh, and acted very surprised, and only then started asking me questions. And so, that was just, it was kind of a shock to me that he just, suddenly assumed that I had not done anything technical, where it was a hackathon, right? By the nature of a hackathon is you're working on a technical project. So this is not really being interrupted, but it's having assumptions being made about me that definitely made me feel like I was being treated differently. Do you have
Is
any
it like
examples?
you were invisible until he pointed out that you're present in the team and you did something?
Yeah, exactly. And it was only two of us. It was only like two people working on a project, and it just felt really weird that he assumed automatically that my partner was the only one who did anything. Yeah.
Well, I am a sophomore, so I don't have any managers, thankfully. But I am a very quiet person in general. At least I used to be. These days, I speak out a lot. But there are people. My college has a really bad gender ratio. It's 1:5,
Oh,
which
wow.
means that's 17% girls only. And that is after our government intervened and said that there has to be a minimum of 17% girls in colleges. So they added extra seats for the girls, only for the girls. And I'm actually one of the girls who got these seats. So that's also there in my college, that feeling that the girls did not deserve their place and they didn't earn their place as much as the boys. Dickwyn has a question.
Yeah, I just want to ask. So you mentioned that there's like a kind of cap there. So when you're applying for a college application, do they specifically like limit, or like how do they decide on that? Is it purely based on luck, or is it like, do they have criteria that you need to know something like that before you can join this computer science program as a female?
Actually, in India, we have entrance exams, which are competitive. And these are MCQ based exams with negative marking. So you can't guess your way through it. And your score in this exam will determine your rank. So every student is given a number. The smaller the number, the better you are. And the people with the lower ranks get to choose their college first and their stream. And every college has a fixed number of seats. So there is a rank cutoff, and beyond which one, like once all the seats are filled, they see how many, like what's the gender ratio, what's the percentage. And if there's less than 17%, then they add enough seats to make it 17% and make it for women only. So that's the next girls on the rank list after that. It's quite different in India.
That seems like a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. I mean, even right now, there's a lot of competition in India because we're a lot of people and many of us are engineers. So throughout, there's a lot of competition.
So a counter question to this. So if for there is a limit for like, and it's kind of like technical computer science like degrees for females. So for those that didn't end up hitting that point, or like didn't end up like meeting that quota, which kind of degree do they move towards? Like, is there a general kind of like second choice that they move on? Like maybe business or something. Is there a specific one that I know? I don't want to be generalizing here. Maybe it could be something else completely. Like other engineering that may be more open.
Apart from engineering, actually, engineering is often the backup for a lot of people. So a backup for engineering is, I can't think of any. We have like a lot of engineering colleges.
Okay. Okay. It's good to know.
Stephanie asks, how do you identify and professionally respond to instances of microaggression? Kelsey, would you like to take this up?
I'm still trying to think of an example, because I don't know how many microaggressions I've identified in like my recent experiences. But do you have an example that comes to mind immediately, Sanjana?
Microaggressions are really hard to spot. That's the worst part. Like,
Hmm.
think that, are they being mean? Is it because I'm a woman, or is this normal? it's really hard to spot microaggressions in the first place. How do you identify? I usually think if it makes me feel bad about something and I am not able to point it out, like pinpoint exactly what part made me feel bad, I usually start thinking about it more. And sometimes, in some instances, you end up feeling like this is happening only to the women and not to the other guys. And when you realize that, I think that's when you can identify, okay, this is a microaggression. By the
Yeah.
time I realize that, it's kind of late to respond or react.
Yeah,
So
I think it's definitely a fine line where you don't it's really difficult to like identify whether like something that offends you is because you think it's targeted at your gender, or you think that it's targeted at something else, or the person's just like a rude person who doesn't have like social awareness. You know, that like it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly why something feels like it's offensive. So George actually, sorry to go off, but a little bit, but George, I think you sent me a resource that Cynthia Lee, who's a lecturer at Stanford, um, uh, wrote. That's called "What Can I Do Today to Create a More Inclusive Community in CS?" And I think this is a great resource. So I'm going to send this in the chat as well.
this is a nice question. Can you compare and contrast your experience with coding in an all-female setting and a heavily male-dominated one? Because I went to an all-girls school and I started coding when I was in 8th grade. So I started out in an all-female environment, and then I shifted to a college with this kind of a gender ratio, which is heavily male-dominated. I have spent one whole year of my college life at home though, but when I was in school, we had a batch of 170 girls, of which the CS section had just 13 people. That's really less, like compared to a subject that's really popular in India, at
Mhm.
least. 13 people is really less. And even among the 13 people, it was like a small little world. We did not have too much exposure outside of the school curriculum. And among the 13 people, I was the representative. I was, participating in competitions and representing my school. But once I got into college, it just changed because now suddenly there's so many people and everyone's coding, and everyone's coding things. They have a lot more exposure. They had a lot more awareness of what goes on in computer science, like what people are doing in the industry. They just had more information, they had more knowledge, which I did not. I came in with basic knowledge about Java and data structures, but that's limited to the curriculum, to the syllabus. So that was something that I had to work on to catch up with these people. And of course, even catching up is difficult because when you're in a setting where you feel like everyone else is already more experienced than you, then even catching up is difficult because you feel like you don't belong there, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Kelsey, do you have any situations like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked hearing about that, about your points, Sanjana. I think like I had a similar experience where I grew up in an area where a lot of people were encouraged to go into STEM. So both boys and girls like studied STEM a lot in high school. And going to college, so I went to Stanford, and there was actually a very good gender balance in the intro computer science series. So CS 106A and CS 106B. I think like so many Stanford undergrads take those classes that the gender balance was actually really great. Um, but then I got into the workforce where the gender balance is not nearly as equal. And I think there have been some differences in the way that people communicate in the workforce versus in college. And I don't want to attribute that to, you know, the gender ratio differences. But like an observation I've had is that people are very, very blunt and much more direct than they were in college. Like in college, you know, you'd be working with your friends and people would, you know, you would have general like messages of support. And I also worked with a lot of females during my college time. But yeah, people communicate in very different ways, especially in male dominated fields and in the workforce when it is like majority men. But yeah, again, it's very difficult to say that it's like just a gender thing. But that's one thing that I've noticed about coding in an all-female setting versus heavily male-dominated one.
I also have another instance. I'm actually a part of a diversity program by Google, and we are 124 girls from all over India. And I realized that in this program, people are a lot more comfortable with sharing that they don't know something, or saying that they're confused about something, or they have some doubts and they need help. Asking for help is so much more comfortable in this setting, in an all girls setting, because somehow, I've said this before, but there's a sense of wanting to prove yourself or something.
Yeah.
In a male dominated setting, a lot of people are mostly focused on showing off, and asking questions makes you feel embarrassed. But that's not there when I'm in an all female setting.
Yeah, no, I've totally felt that before. So thanks for pointing that out because I definitely have felt that in a heavily male dominated like setting, I really hesitate to expose like what I don't know because I'm afraid that I'm going to be judged as a female engineer and they're going to like make generalizations about all female engineers and think that, you know, if I don't understand this, like maybe I'm slow or like maybe all female engineers like won't understand, you know, something. So I think some of it is also like a personal like problem that I have. Like I've had to talk myself into saying like, just go for it, just ask your question. Like don't assume that people are going to generalize, like, you know, assume the best in people. But at the same time, there's the natural like instinct in me is like, you know, don't expose your weaknesses. Like you already feel a little bit different. Like you don't want to be like, you don't want to feel like you're even more different. So yeah.
I can think of like an example. I saw once, this was a few years ago, there was a football match or soccer which between a women's team and a men's team, and the women's team lost, and that invited a lot of comments on how women can't play football. But I'm just thinking, men's team lose all the time. Like you have teams losing against each other. You don't have news articles writing that, oh, France lost to Italy, this is why French men can't play. That's that just
Yeah, that
doesn't
sounds
happen.
silly. Yeah. Cool. And I think Stephanie asked, what are some ways we can support other women in their careers? You have
I
thoughts?
haven't started my career yet, but I have been very involved in some diversity programs and just encouraging other people. So this diversity program that I'm a part of, my department has 16 girls and only one applied to it, me. And so I asked the other 15, like, what happened? Why didn't you even apply? And they said they were sure that they won't get in. It's Google. It's, you know, I'm not good enough for Google. So it's like, if you don't apply, you're definitely not going to get in. But I've been trying to send them opportunities. Like whenever I see posts on LinkedIn that, okay, there's some internship or some fellowship, I just forward them and I'm like, apply. Also, I take session. I established the girls coding chapter in my club because I told you the participation of girls was pretty low, and I did not want that. I realized that participating in a room full of boys is difficult. So maybe before do, before attempting to do that, maybe you can start a little small, maybe participating in a room full of girls first, and then maybe in a more mixed setting where there's more girls than boys, and then maybe equal number, and then finally maybe they can start participating. They have enough confidence to participate in a room full of boys, maybe even if they're the only girl over there. So I started the girls coding chapter, and it's to mainly support the girls. Like I said, in an all girls environment, people are a lot more comfortable to ask questions and get their doubts cleared. So it's actually benefiting a lot of people as well. I think that was one of the nice ways I could help support other women.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that idea, and I love that you carried it out and started that chapter. Cool. I also think that like in this is similar to you like forwarding initiatives to other women. I think a very easy way to promote more diversity in like your own workplace is just to refer other women to positions within, you know, either your college or your company, whatever. I think just encouraging more people to like go for positions that they may not even feel qualified for is a very easy way to support other women in their careers. And I think another thing that I've noticed recently is talking to other women, like especially women engineers, and talking about your struggles together and kind of helping each other with them is also super like important and really helpful to everybody involved. Like hearing somebody else talk about a struggle that they have as a woman engineer really helps me validate my own struggles, and definitely contributes to a better feeling of belonging. Um,
And just
yeah,
it also makes you realize that there are so many things that you did not realize were wrong. Like if someone's being hostile to you, the first reaction I have is what's wrong with me. But when I speak to other women and they have similar experiences, I start realizing maybe it's not what's wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with these people.
with everybody else. Yeah, always great to feel like it's not actually your problem. I think there's a question for Dickwyn.
Yeah.
From a male point of view, can you speak on the importance of the men in the industry being vocal allies?
Yeah, I responded to Chanel on this in the thread there, but let me just go through my thought process when trying to answer this question in particular. So for me, I feel that being vocal as a male is it's somewhat important, I would say. But if I were to be vocal by myself and my leaders would not like see that as an issue, like I can't do anything to be honest. Like I think that's really like with a lot of companies where it's like the hierarchy is like if you can voice your voices that much, but like as long as they don't see it as a problem, they won't try to like act upon it. And I think so. One great example in particular is that this past few months, I've been kind of revamping the hiring process for our kind of like the teams that I hire for. And in particular, one kind of like I would say win for the hiring efforts is that I hired a lot throughout the year, and this year in particular, I've hired like 3 women engineers compared to last year where I didn't hire any female engineers at all. Like none of them that I interviewed or like successful passed through actually ended up being hired in a sense there. So I feel that I'm changing it a bit by one of the main things that I kind of like shifted towards this year was that to try to have the playing field leveled. By leveled meaning that asking her the same questions and also having the candidates being evaluated in the same kind of scope and also having different opinions about a candidate in particular. Because in the past, what we've been doing in our hiring efforts was that it was kind of one-sided where somebody would say something and that was trump like the what do you call that the what do you call the what do you call the opinions of someone else in particular. So I think so for this, going back to that question there, I would say it's important to first get the leaders up to speed and convince them. I would say I don't think that's a good way, but like I think that's the reality of it. And once they're really on board with that, and then it's to change the actual process and evaluate that. Because I feel that a lot of processes within the tech industry are like biased in some way or sense there. So like identifying those issues and figuring out, okay, that's a valid issue is probably the first thing to do. Because like if you don't figure out those process changes, like you can get a female engineer or a women engineer in, or like somebody who has like a different background or is more diverse in a sense there, and the process that the company is running on will make them feel like they might not feel belong within the company, or like when they're actually working, some processes might inadvertently cause them a bit of heartache when they're actually working there. It's just like, I think that's especially important. Like, yes, getting diversifying the workforce is one thing, but when they're actually in the company itself, that's a whole different thing. And I think so. I've read in the past that the retention rate for female engineers, or people who are from diverse backgrounds, usually they feel like they get the job, but they feel pressured, and then they end up leaving the job and going somewhere else because they feel that they're not welcome in that position there. So I think that's equally as important, because like, sure, hiring is important, but like the whole entire experience of how those individuals experience the company must also be equal in a sense there, not just for like, I know a lot of processes in particular, they just heavily focus on like male engineers there, but that is inadvertently, nobody really realizes that until someone picks it up. And going back to the actual like answer there, like somebody needs to like be aware of that so that we can really like figure out, okay, that's something that we need to change, and then we can work towards that. So that's my kind of answer for that. Any thoughts,
Cool.
Kelsey, Sanjana?
I actually see that there's a follow-up that I think relates to some things you're talking about. It's from Stephanie. She asks, do you feel that women need to work harder to prove themselves during the hiring process?
No, that's not. No, I would say I said no because mainly of how we're evaluating the candidates. For me in particular, when I evaluate them, I'm a very open kind of person. Whenever I have like technical interviews in particular, I allow the candidates to use Google at all. I'm just purely seeing their problem solving skill. Like oftentimes I tend to like not have them turn on the video and just let them like talk through it so that I can like reduce that bias towards that. But yeah, I wouldn't say, maybe there is, I might not realize it, but from my understanding of my own process, I would say no, there isn't a, what do you call that, extra kind of like imbalance in terms of males versus females and how I interview, or how I've approached the interview there. But again, this is something that I can't catch by myself. Probably I need to have someone like audit me or something like that to really like figure out like, is there really a balance there? But as is, I would say I'm very fairly aware of some these things like that. So I would say no for me in particular. But I don't know if like other companies, other hiring managers, because the thing about hiring is that interviewers, they can hire any way they want, and like, and depending on the company's process, there might be a different kind of like flow in terms of how individuals are being evaluated upon. And like, I'm not really that sure about like how different companies operate in a sense there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is something that depends on the company. I have had some experience with some tech companies like Google, Microsoft. I have not felt like women need to work harder in these companies, like for the hiring process. Maybe there might be some companies, but in my experience, it's been pretty smooth.
Yeah. I think Chanel is raising her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to just make a comment on what dickwyn said. He made a good point that no, women don't need to technically work harder to prove themselves, but kind of my point of saying, from a male point of view, and you, dickwyn, have, acknowledged and see that there is an imbalance in the workplace and in the hiring, situation. But it's so important for you to, as a male in the industry, go to your peers and other people that are hiring and help them to realize that that problem is there so that they can implement those things along with you. So it's not so much that what a female needs to do to get there, but what the males that are already there need to help each other understand so that more females can get in the door. You need to open the door for us where we sometimes can't even get there yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think like there are a lot of implicit biases that people have about women, and I think the connotation of a woman engineer comes with a lot more baggage than, you know, the connotation of a male engineer. Um, so sometimes people do feel like, you know, it is harder for a woman to put herself out there and to be accepted by, you know, male interviewers. Um, yeah, I think, I mean, I have like a slightly related personal example. I remember like interviewing for quite a few startups when I was looking for internships in, I think, junior year of college. And at these startups, I made sure to dress a certain way as to not make myself look that different from the other engineers at the company who are mostly male. And I think like having to do that is not something that, you know, maybe a lot of male engineers would have to think about. Um, and yeah, it just kind of proves, I mean, it is a very small thing. Like I don't think I cared that much that I was like, you know, picking clothes that were like, you know, t-shirt and like jeans trying to fit in. I don't think that was a huge deal to me, but at the same time, it just proves that that's just a tip of the iceberg. Like there are many other things that women feel when they're interviewing. There are a lot of other pressures and ways that they feel like they need to present themselves that may make interviewing more difficult than it is for males.
It's actually a great point because it reminds me of something Derville had said on the Ed Forum the other day, that a lot of the women at the top, they start behaving like the men too. And sometimes it's just a way to fit in, just blend in. And I realized maybe some of my behavior is also not really, there is a certain pressure to act a certain way to fit in. And I just wish CS was more feminine. Like there was a little more femininity associated with CS, because I think that would make it a lot more comfortable. Just right now, the image of CS is, you know, dudes just coding for 48 hours straight, high on some coffee, Red Bull concoction. And yeah, I just wish we had more people, you know, wearing high heels and makeup, and I think that would be cool.
Yeah, I think it like at this one company that I interned at, there was this girl on a team adjacent to mine that like, you know, wore like really cute dresses and, you know, like really slayed the fashion game. And that inspired me to, you know, dress however I wanted, you know, given that it should be professionally appropriate to work. And so I think like setting an example for other women and, you know, just being yourself is also something that's really underrated, and that like is hard to do, but I think people should strive to do it more. I say that, but it's also like I struggle with this too. It's definitely easier said than done.
There's like this really long question on the thread. There's, do you think tech companies understand that they'll truly have the best talent if they're inclusive? How do you think they're doing with developing diverse and representative workforces? Are they making changes to the ways of working, not just hiring practice, but encouraging everyone to be involved outside in their own outside of work life, particularly when children come into mix? Things like better funded parental leave, evenly split, low cost, high quality, low cost childcare, flexibility with working hours. Okay. Okay, so this is about, um, it's a very long question, but it's about hiring practices and making the workplace more comfortable for women after hiring, and in particular with childcare. So like women have the added burden of being somehow the major caretaker of the child, even though there's two parents. But what are your thoughts on that, Kelsey?
Um, I think that some tech companies that are kind of in the space that I've seen are making good progress towards being more inclusive and adding benefits that help everyone, not just male engineers. Um, and yeah, I think those startups and those like large companies do attract better talent. I think usually like the companies that tend to have better benefits that benefit female engineers a lot also tend to be the companies that are like doing very well and have like other perks and have like high compensation numbers as well. So it's not surprising that they would be able to attract top talent. um, yeah, but I think like at least in Silicon Valley, I think there is more movement towards better benefits and like cultural changes. Like I know ever since COVID, a lot of companies are actually more open to being remote, which actually benefits a lot of people if they have kids and allows for more flexibility. So yeah, I think there are strides being taken. And I think that like people are starting to, or companies are starting to understand that the better benefits that you have and the more flexible you are to allow people to attend to their other commitments, like their family, the better talent you can attract. But I don't know, it might be different in different places. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I had a question like, um, there's maternity leave, but do you also have paternity leave in your company?
Yes. Yeah.
And are people comfortable taking that?
Um, yeah. So there's like my company is very small, but we're like growing pretty fast. But I know just one person who has had a baby, and he took paternity leave, but it was not as generous as like big companies maternity parental leave. So it was like just I think a month or 2 months, and it was like flexible. But basically, like at by the nature of a small company, everybody is pretty indispensable. So, like the longer he was away, the more work that other people had, basically. But yeah, we had like equal paternity and maternity leave durations.
Got it.
This question in particular brought back like this book I was reading a couple months back. It's called The Nordic Theory of Everything. So this writer, she comes from I believe somewhere in the Nordic region. I think so it's Norway or something, or Sweden, something like that. And she mentioned the book revolves around her journey of coming to America and then like starting a family and all. And then she, at the end of the book, she said she's gonna decide to stay in America because of the kind of benefits of being in America outweighs the kind of like benefits that are available back in our home country, where they have like, I think so like how many years of parental leave or something like that, and like how much childcare that the actual government pays for them. And then I think so this book in particular relates back to also, I think so the industry has a role to play within these kind of like additional benefits. But I think so the country also and the government also has kind of like a kind of need to push for these kinds of programs so that everyone are equally, what do you call that, equally having the same kind of benefits. Because if like the country doesn't set somewhat an example, like industries, they can definitely play it to their own advantage and say like, okay, I'm not going to give you this as much as parental leave if you are having a child or something like that. So that's an interesting point of it. And for me, like my company, like I had two of my coworkers, one is my manager and one is my coworker in the design team. They actually have their wives have children in the past year, and like they all took like quite extensive like leaves also. They did take advantage of that. I think so for them in particular, it's their first child, so they wanted to be there to kind of experience their child's like, first few months there. Like particular for me, like I relate back to what Kelsey mentioned because my company is technically not so big also, and like one of my managers that took the paternal leave was basically he was in the same project as me. And like when he left, I was basically doing like most of his work. So like it was pressure for me, but I felt that it's fine for those few months because I understand from his point of view is he really wants to see his first child. And for him in particular, it was like they were trying to get a child for quite a while. So like for them to finally get a baby, that was like pretty amazing. Like he wanted to fully experience that. So yeah, definitely does put workload on someone, but I don't think so. That is kind of the argument to say like, okay, you shouldn't like take leave or like you shouldn't care too much about coworker. I think so. If you want, you need to be kind of like stingy towards like people and just like follow your own needs. I know it's bad, but I think so at the day of at the end of the day, the company needs to operate in a way where if someone isn't there necessarily, someone else should be able to step in. It shouldn't be designed that that person needs to do everything or that person needs to do something, which is a very bad kind of like reliance or like bad culture, I would say, where like people are kind of like fearing to like take leaves or take holidays just because they feel like, okay, my coworker might not be able to cope or this project might not be able to proceed further. That's some kind of flaw in the system where like, what do you call that? A reliance is on one person. That's not very good.
We need
That's really,
redundancy.
like, I think as you mentioned, it depends on the country as well. In India, it's I don't think it's too much of the companies, but there is a very large societal pressure on being like maintaining a family. Like that's the role of a woman. And I know people who have their families pressure them to leave their careers. So I'm not sure if this is entirely about the company and their policies, but even from a societal point of view, if you hear this from your own parents that you'd rather, focus on your family than on your career, then that is something that leads to a lot of women dropping out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes the culture differences are not just something that can be easily solved with something like parental leave. I think they're much bigger and definitely like a systemic change would have to occur to change things. Um, I think Stephanie has a good question. Thanks, by the way, for everybody who's asking questions in the chat. These are really awesome questions. What inspired your initial interest in computer science? Was there a particular project or person who inspired you? Sanjana.
I have no idea. I got interested in fourth grade. I was too
Wow.
small. But
Wait, but what caused that? That's crazy. That's an incredibly
exactly.
young age.
So I used to have this habit of disassembling and reassembling things. And people used to joke around that, oh, you're like an engineer. I'm like, yeah, why not? Also, I have maybe like, and my dad's an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer. I have cousins who are engineers. I don't know. Also in India, there are way too many engineers. So it's, you get used to that whole thing. I like computers because, mainly because I was also very good at it. So when you're good at something, you tend to get more involved and more interested. So people around me, they told me, you're good at this. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can try it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's incredible that you're able to, I don't know, identify that interest in fourth grade. In fourth grade, I don't know what I was doing, but it was definitely not engineering. um, yeah, I guess for me, my initial interest in computer science was stemmed from just the thought that you could have this ability to create anything you wanted, like create any tool that you wanted. You could create it for yourself and you could also distribute it to other people. That was so cool. I don't think I like thought I couldn't think of any other subject that allowed me to do that. So yeah, I think my first project ever in high school, which is when I first learned to code, was a prime number factorizer, I think. And I think there was some math problem that I had in math class where we had to factor some number, or I don't know, maybe we were doing like polynomials and we had to, do some sort of factorization. Anyway, having prime numbers was useful in some way. So I went to my computer science class and created this little program to factor numbers. I think it just listed out the factors of a number and I could use it for math class. And that was so cool to me. I was like, wow, I just created a program for myself that like solves another issue. So yeah, so having computer science be so applicable to other parts of my life, that was the coolest thing ever to me. And then like knowing that I could improve at it and eventually make things that could help other people, that was just immensely exciting to me.
Also, the process of elimination also helped me out here. So I was like, I don't like humanities. I don't like English. I don't like other things. I like
You see,
I'm used to.
as somebody who like really enjoyed the humanities, I think it was a little more difficult for me. But that's really nice that you had that kind of process of elimination. Very convenient. But yeah, I think my interest in like the humanities, I was always interested in like writing stories and reading. And I did a creative writing minor in college because of that interest. But I think that interest also pushed me to enjoy computer science even more because I could make a website that allowed me to publish like a fiction piece that I wrote, something like that, because it was so applicable, and because I had like a lot of other interests. Yeah, I think computer science is like it is truly like so extendable to any other domain. I think being like diverse in your interests is also something that makes computer science more interesting. Cool. So we have another question from Sam. Did you ask any specific questions to evaluate the culture of the company during the interview process? What are some red flags or green flags? Any thoughts?
I'm a student, so I should be learning this. Culture of the company during interview. Dickwyn, do you have any inputs on that since you have experience with hiring?
I would say that a red flag for me when I was looking for jobs, like for me in particular, like my situation is interesting because I'm in the US. I'm on a visa, so like I'm an international student. So like whenever I look for jobs and I see companies that like necessarily say that they're diverse, so they want to hire international students, I see that as a red flag to be honest, because like if they're trying to advertise that, something is wrong. Something is a bit off sometimes. It's not necessarily not. It doesn't always mean that it's off, but like it does usually lead to like why are they like publicly advertising that in the job description there.
Yeah.
So I'd say if they're very vocal about that, like definitely prep with caution. I'd say like not like a red or green light, probably a yellow light may or may not be bad. So yeah, I would say that would be an obvious one. I would say if like unless it's a super big company, of course they do kind of advertise diversity in their what do you call it, hiring. But like I would say with these kind of things, it depends also on like the specific team. If you're talking about a bigger or mid-sized to a large company where they have like different teams across, like I don't think so diversity and all these kind of things are consistent throughout. I think so a lot of companies try to do that, but I don't think so. It does at the end of the day become like diversity is somewhat equal throughout the teams.
Yeah, it's also been a while since I've like interviewed at a company, so I am trying to think of like a good question that you could use to evaluate like how good a culture is. I think one good question that I've been asked as I started like recently interviewing. One good question is you can ask the interviewer, what are some negative things you see about your company? And sometimes that will bring out like a real truth if the interviewer is being candid. And I think that can be like a good indicator of a potential problem. But yeah, I think just evaluating how you connect with the interviewer can also be a good tell of like how the culture is, especially if you're like interviewing with somebody who would be your manager or would be on your team. It's kind of like that person is a literal direct representation of a person on the team, you know, somebody who like directly represents the culture. So if they have any red flags, like if you think that the interviewer is giving you bad vibes, then that's probably a red flag.
I like that question. I'm going to use that.
I see a question from Valerian asking how to avoid sexual harassment by higher authority people in the company or organization, which I think is a really important question, which is why I definitely think we should talk about this. Do you have any thoughts on this, Sanjana?
Sexual harassment. I can't find the question, first of all.
It was a direct message.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think we should definitely talk about it if you have thoughts.
So recently, if you've been following the news, there was the case at University of Michigan.
Can you?
With sexual harassment, there's been a lot of. I'm sorry?
Sorry. Oh, I think something was laggy, but yeah. Sorry. Could you explain the UMich case a little? I'm not sure if I know about it.
Yeah. So there's a professor, Walter Lasecki, I think, and he's, a repeated offender, basically. Yeah. The Dickwyn just sent a link. It caused a huge uproar, and it caused a lot of people to start speaking out about their experiences. And even in India, I was following some people on Twitter who were speaking about their experiences about sexual assault in academia. I just think it gets really difficult when no one does anything after you complain. And I think that's really common. Like when you lodge a complaint and they're like, we'll look into it, or sorry you feel that way, but they don't really do anything about it. There's a lot of people who, it's like protecting these people because they offer something. They might be really good at their work, or they might be a valuable employee. So when that happens, then it's like the company or the board would try to keep things quiet and just brush it under the carpet, and that is very disheartening for anyone, for any victim, that you prioritize these things over someone else's comfort or even rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's one thing I have about like companies in particular. They have like they promote diversity and all these kind of things, but how do they actually apply that in actual day to day, like on their processes? It doesn't. You can't really rate them on like whether they're actually doing anything, and like it goes back to like their integrity on like how they want to approach these kind of like situation. I would say I think the Uber example, like it's a very good example, like how they handled that. For me, like after I heard that, I honestly stopped using Uber in particular. Even after they changed management, I feel that that's kind of a systemic kind of, it's something within the company itself that is from top to bottom. There's an issue there. I don't think it's just with the CEO that was encouraging that, but I feel that the community itself that Uber is built upon inside the company probably encourages that also. And like I don't think so. Even if you change leadership, like you need to change everything from top to bottom, which is like I don't think they fully did that. So it goes back to the processes, like how companies operate that and like how they actually act upon these kind of situations, which is like it's hard to prove like that you can actually do that until something actually happens. Or like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts on this question is I think it's very sad that a lot of women have to think about how to avoid sexual harassment, because that shouldn't be the way that things are, right? It should be that men should know not to sexually harass women and vice versa. but yeah, that's obviously not the case, as we've seen through like the Uber example and I guess the Umish example that I just read about. But yeah, I think like one thing that like male allies can do is really call out people who are harassing people. And because I've like personally seen friends be affected by this, you know, feeling extremely uncomfortable in their workplace, even at like really big companies where like the HR departments are like very established. Yeah, like being harassed, basically like being stalked by people who are pursuing them, who are coworkers. Yeah, I think it would just be like such a like an important message if like their friends had told them, hey, stop harassing this person, you know, you're being a terrible person, you're being a terrible coworker, like you're gonna get fired for this. You know, warning other people and also telling them like about how their actions are wrong. So I think that this is something that allies can do. And yeah.
This is in particular a situation where male allies are very important because women, we're scared to speak out. Like if this reflects on our career prospects, if
Mhm.
this could incite some kind of revenge, or it's scary for victims of sexual
Mhm.
assault to speak out against these things. And also, wait, I just blanked out. Sorry.
No worries. Um, cool. I think there are quite a few like awesome comments in the chat as well. Like I think George mentioned um, there's like implicit biases that you can even see in Google Images. If
Yeah.
you like searched up right now, engineer stock photo, you'd probably get scientist stock photo was his example. I think you get a bunch of men. Oh yeah.
That's a creepy photo.
I actually have a personal experience about this sexual assault thing. So we had a professor in college who was very creepy towards the women, and this is not just from my batch. This is my direct senior batch. So they're juniors in college right now. They actually tried to complain against this professor, and they lodged a complaint. And it was thankfully it was the boys who actually spoke up, and that was very nice of them. But it backfired because this professor was on the placement cell, and he basically intimidated them. He said he'll make them fail, or not let them get a job after they graduate. So they had to actually go and apologize to him after that. After lodging a complaint, they had to
No
apologize.
way.
Yeah,
That's like the definition of retaliation. Like that, it should be illegal.
it should be, but these things never reach that high that you can actually make a case out of it. And this level of intimidation, it began like really early, so it could not escalate. So everyone got scared naturally. We are not really that powerful against the system. So
Oh wow. So is the professor still, I'm guessing, still at your university?
still at my university. But
That's that
he
sucks.
thank God he was less creepy with my batch.
What does that even mean? That's
That
awful. I
means
mean,
like that it was uncomfortable, but you could ignore it. With my senior batch, I think they could not ignore it. But yeah, it was pretty awful.
That's unfortunate
oh.
to hear.
Yeah. That's a really good question. What changes do you feel could be made? A, would have a large impact on future female students, and B, are relatively easy to implement. Also, are there sectors within CS that need more attention than others?
Hmm. I think this question is interesting because it raises the point that they want a like changes that could have a large impact on future female students, but are also really easy to implement. And I think that sometimes it's if there were actions that were just really easy to implement that could suddenly solve the problem of diversity in engineering, then I think most companies would have already done this, or most schools would have done this already.
Now,
I
I
think
think they're asking for both kinds. Like they want an example which would have a large impact and one example
okay.
that's easy to implement but hasn't been yet.
Okay, so it's like, okay, got it. So these are independent questions of each other. Um, okay, that makes it a little bit more easy. Um, okay, changes that would have a large impact on future female students. I guess they're asking about an academic setting. So do you have thoughts on this, Sanjana?
Academic. Honestly, a lot of the things that we mentioned are just basic human decency.
Yeah.
Just be a decent human being. Like don't assault students, don't gatekeep things, don't be rude, don't be dismissive, don't
Yeah.
pick on people. These are just, it's human decency.
Yeah, and I think I'd want to like reiterate something that we touched on before, to make sure that like bad behavior is called out, and to like be that person who takes the action to call out bad behavior, and to have those uncomfortable conversations with perpetrators of like bad behavior. Um, yeah, do you have any ideas on changes that are relatively easy to implement that could positively affect um, diversity in tech?
Well, I think being an ally can't be very difficult, can it? Just speaking out, just be supportive. I think that goes a long way actually, because a lot of the times we feel helpless because we feel alone and we're the only ones who are, you know, going through this. And not just women, but like even people, it shows that you have empathy, it shows that you care, it shows that you would support me and that you would actually have my back. So if people actually stand up for these things, then as an ally, I think that goes a very long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think the easiest thing to implement is to like make sure you're consciously supporting other people in your daily lives, people close to you. Um, Nobody needs to like make huge sweeping actions, like rewrite legislation. Like not everyone has that ability, but we all have the ability to be a positive impact in the people around us's lives. um, and so I think that's the easiest thing to do, is just to be a decent person and to call out bad behavior.
I think one important bit, or like one very effective way, is also starting from the very bottom of like how we educate our future generation, or like how we educate children in general. Like I think so a lot of these notions that we were brought up towards were like taught to us in school or when we were young, or by our parents and by like basically pop culture basically there. So like if we can change like how those things are phrased in those scenarios, which I feel that these days like it is being more apparent that like we need to have equal kinds of rights and all these things. But if we were to have that equal playing field, like having that understanding, like basically rooted in their like what do you call that, their like life when they first start out learning these kind of things, I think so it will definitely change in the future. But that definitely takes time to implement. And depending on how, I know these kind of education in particular is a very political kind of thing in each country, where like everyone is trying to phrase something, or like the government is trying to phrase something in a certain point of view to their advantage in any way or form there. I think Sanjana dropped off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
she might have had
Yeah.
like an
Connection
internet
issues.
problem.
But yeah, I think so. Education at the very like elementary level needs to be important. Needs to change in general to have that kind of impact on a long term, because you can change like adults' mind of thinking, but like at the end of the day, like they were taught towards their entire life that this is engineers is for males or these kind of things, and like they they might have like differing thoughts when they grow up, but like deep down, they still are going to relate back, okay, engineers are for males, because like that's what they have learned throughout their life. And like trying to change someone's thought halfway through their life is a bit hard, I would say. Like it's possible, but it's very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make really great points. And I think it's also important to recognize that because, we can't change the past, we can't change the way that a lot of people around us were raised or the values that are ingrained in them. We have to make strides to try to do that re-education and try to give them new context on ways that the world's current values differ from maybe theirs. And so, yeah, I think the first step for making sure that people have like all necessary context for like what a good value is to like just be open about talking to other people, and like yeah, just recognizing that other people come from different backgrounds and trying to like give them like knowledge of what they think is right. Sorry, I'm like slightly blanking now. It's been like a long time since I've talked for like over an hour. But yeah, I think, do we have any other like good questions that we want to go through before the end of this session? Because I know we're going a little bit over time.
Did we discuss other sectors within CS that need more attention than others?
Oh, okay, we haven't yet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think in general, academia is, like I mentioned, the problem we had with our professor. It's very easy to intimidate students and keep them quiet. So I think that is one area where there is a scope for a lot of problems.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm wondering if there are like sectors within the field of like software engineering where like some fields are more male dominated than others or something. I'm not sure on the statistics on that.
Well, there could be an argument that in the field of AI, there's the risk of bias creeping into the data and training, which is a
Right.
really big discussion right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's very interesting that, people say AI is biased, like it's very scary what the future of AI is. And, AI is just reflecting the biases that we already have. And so I think it's actually shedding light on, how biased people are and how many inherent biases that that humans already have. But yeah, perpetuating those biases because of data that AI is trained on is definitely a huge concern. And I think there needs to be like more study into that and like more conscious efforts to like moderate data sets and to make sure that they're actually representative of all people.
So there's two last questions. One is, what was the hardest thing to conquer when you were starting out? And the second is, what about women who had to take a break in their career when the pandemic hit? How do they return back to work? So what was the hardest thing to conquer when you were starting out? I think when I was starting out, I started out in an all-girls environment, but even otherwise, when you're starting out, it's less of a problem. It becomes more of a struggle once you are good at something. And that's when a lot of people have a lot to say about what you're doing. But when you're starting out, I think you'll have a lot of people trying to show off and in front of you, like, this is how much I know. What are your thoughts, Kelsey? Problems when you were starting out?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me when I was first learning to code was every like there seemed to be so many different tools that I needed to learn, that it wasn't just like for loops and if statements It wasn't just that could build a program. It was that, and also knowledge of so many other frameworks and so many other tools. And like, you know, all these different paths of computer science really confused me and intimidated me. And so the hardest thing was like getting past that intimidation and starting to think of these things as more things to learn instead of like more things that are blocking me from becoming competent. And like shifting towards that kind of growth mindset was very difficult because you always feel intimidated as a beginner in software and a beginner in coding. And even like several years later now, like it's still easy to feel intimidated. But I think a really good, a really important thing to do is to try to like consciously undercut that with like acknowledgement that there are so many things to learn and learning is adding on to your existing base of knowledge. And like learning is just like making you a better person, more well-rounded engineer. And it's not necessarily like a blockage to becoming like competent in some way.
And what advice would you have for someone who's getting back to their career after the pandemic, after taking a break?
I don't know if I'm the most, like, I don't think I could give like qualified advice on this necessarily. I guess, do you have any thoughts, or Dickwyn?
But I have absolutely no, I haven't even worked in a company yet. So returning is not even a question for me. But I do know that some companies have some programs for specifically for women who return after taking a break in their career, because taking a break is more common among women who would like to take a break because they want to take care of their family. So there are many programs, I think. I don't know if there are many, but I know of a few at least.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I can't really answer this question in particular, like how to have someone who took a break in their career get back to work, because I don't have like personal experience with that yet. But like kind of general like job hunting advice that helped me is reaching out to other people is often more effective than just blind applying online, mass applying on Indeed or other job sites. And something interesting I've noticed is that I get a lot of messages, LinkedIn messages, like emails from random people, and they're all male. I have not heard from a single female asking me to refer them or asking me to give them information on this role or something. So yeah, I think especially for females, we should go out and like contact other people and try to reach out to people instead of just blind applying.
Something that's really funny is I have an anecdote exactly like this, like recently. So have you heard of PyCon? So it's a Python conference. We have PyCon India in September, and I was thinking of applying, registering, but I was thinking, hesitating. Then I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw someone. She said that she's giving away 3 tickets to PyCon, and you have to, text her to get it. So I thought, okay, I was thinking of registering anyway. So I asked her, and she thanked me for asking her for a ticket. And this is not a reaction I would expect, but she said, out of all the messages she's got, I was the first and only girl. And she has only 3 tickets, but she's definitely going to give me one of them. Like, that's all it takes, just reaching out.
Yeah.
Just sending a message. That's all. It's something so small, but a lot of girls, I'm sure a lot of people hesitated. I hesitated too, like, should I really ask? But then I thought, okay, let's. And wow, I was the only girl.
Yeah, that's insane. I'm really glad you reached out. It's funny that she like thanked you. That's awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes women feel like it's difficult to reach out for help because, again, like we discussed earlier, they might be perceived a certain way. But yeah, I think it's important to like reach out to help yourself and also to like set an example to other people.
Yeah. I think we're done with the questions. I'll come back and type the answers to some of them. So this AMA was just discussing and responding to the chat.
I know, I love how we were supposed to like type and like speak at the same time, but I was like, speaking is alone is too hard for me. Yeah, I think
I have like one typed answer and I'm hesitating to press send because I just keep proofreading.
It's the permanence of like written communication. It's difficult. Yeah, I think maybe we should just like start answering these like through text.
Yeah.
And we could probably like
do that on our own time, like in some time.
Yeah, we could. Typing and talking is hard. Yeah.
Typing and talking is very hard.
Yeah, I'll send over the transcript for this. I think it should be ready in like 5 minutes, and then you all can probably copy paste and simplify some of your typings.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess maybe we should adjourn this Zoom meeting. Thanks everyone for coming and for staying the whole time. I'm really impressed, and all the awesome questions and comments that we had in chat. Like this was super engaging. And thanks again, Sanjana and Dickwyn, for organizing this and for making this happen. Yeah, they did all the work. I just showed up. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Dickwyn, for the initiative. Like I had no idea that people were willing to talk about this until Dickwyn pointed it out. And then I realized that a lot of people wanted this discussion to be held. So thanks for pointing that out, Dickwyn.
Yeah, since I had my AMA, I was like racking my brain. Okay, who to ask? And like honestly, the way I found Kelsey was very interesting. Like I found her through what do you call that? One of her videos that was on Reddit. And then I thought like her video made a lot of sense. Like it was very much like similar to what Code and Place was doing. And then like I went over to Instagram and messaged her saying that, okay, this sounds very much like Code and Place since she graduated from Stanford. So I thought like maybe she was part of the program. I said yes, she was a section leader. I said okay. And then like yeah, then we stopped there. And then like when I was like looking for people to like that were kind of passionate to talk about that, I thought about like a few people, and like Kelsey was one of the people that actually responded to me. Like I think a lot of people were like didn't want to do it because it was too like sudden. Like I was like basically messaging them like 24 hours ago, and they said okay, like it's just, if you asked me earlier, they might have considered, but like since you're rushing this, like I don't think so we could have gotten that point. But I think so it's fine. This is the last official kind of like engagement or event of Code and Place. It's a good end to this.
Yeah.
Really grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
for
thank you for coming.
Attending.
All right, thank you everyone.
Awesome.
Have a great weekend, or the rest of the weekend. I guess like Sunday already.
Sounds good.
Monday for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks everybody again. Yeah.
Thank you on the meeting.